Hello world and welcome to Time to Build Thursday. I'm King Kuga. I'm building the rest of the Daltanious Gunper unit. I built half last night. I am still sick. I was sick yesterday and I couldn't finish it because I was just too worn out. I'm still sick. I'm gonna build the second half tonight, and yeah, that's the plan. I'm not gonna beat around the bush. I'll be watching Defunct Land. I'll put it up in the corner. I won't be talking much. Nobody came last night. Nobody probably come tonight, if I'm being honest. But just enjoy the vibes. 1 second here. Do I have it open? I thought I did. Okay, here I am, and camera sources. There we go. All right, this will be a very minimal talking episode, just because, yeah. I said you already know what's going to happen from yesterday. There's no surprises here, and again, I'm sick, so it's just gonna be what it is. Kevin goes so hard. Like, damn, bro. Save some for the rest of us. Started off as kind of a shitposting channel, Defunct Land, but he has become a genuinely good documentarian. Kudos to you, Kevin Perjurer. Become as gods.
most frightening feature that it had was game. The mechanical man flirted with the king's courtesans, enraging him. To defuse the situation, the craftsman opened the automaton and began disassembling him. He invited the king to do the same, and as he examined the body made of wood, glue, and strings, the king remarked, quote, "Could it be possible that human skill can do something that can match what is created by heaven and earth?" Other philosophers saw promise in automatons. Aristotle, for instance, theorized that, quote, "If every instrument could accomplish its own work, chief workmen would not want servants, nor master slaves," implying that if automatons were skilled and abundant, they could constitute a majority of the workforce. While philosophers pondered the implications of automatons, their existence was becoming more of a possibility as technology progressed. Machines were becoming more detailed and precise.
Welcome. I need to figure out why my bot is reading everything twice. Welcome, Space Policeman. I know you've built this. What did you think about the stickers on the bottom of the feet? Because I fucking hate them. I fucking hate them. Did you paint that part or what?
Specifically those used in timekeeping and astronomy. Still, the prospect of creating a mechanical human, let alone a convincing one, was out of reach. The human body is large and heavy, but it has the ability to move in slow, smooth, and subtle ways. This makes it particularly difficult to replicate, especially with ancient machinery. However, there was one class of animal that made for a more achievable automaton.
My mic working? Okay.
To the human eye, birds move in a sharp, mechanical fashion, and their small form made their construction unique. There are several stories of fabricated birds in ancient China and Greece, but the first true bird automaton might have been invented in the 5th century BCE by the mathematician Architas. According to some sources, the wooden bird was able to fly several hundred meters on its own through the use of an internal balloon that was filled with compressed air or steam. When released, the bird would be launched, possibly on a wire, with the escaping gas propelling the bird down the line. More realistic interpretations of the device argue that if Architas did create the bird, it likely utilized a hidden counterweight. When the compressed air was released, the bird became lighter, causing the counterweight to fall and the bird to fly to a higher branch in a tree. Regardless of how the bird functioned, it was not being puppeteered by a human. It was moving on its own accord. It was an automaton, one of, if not the first, of its kind. Over the next millennia, automata progressed alongside mechanics. In 50 AD, Philo of Alexandria published several descriptions of mechanical birds and miniature human figures. 8 centuries later, the Banu Musa brothers published the Book of Ingenious Devices, a work filled with descriptions of ingenious automata. In 1206, Ismail al-Jazari published the Book of Knowledge of Ingenious Mechanical Devices, which built off of the Banu Musa brothers' work, and introduced a new device, the elephant clock. This famous clock, timed with a bucket slowly sinking into a pool of water, featured multiple animated figures which would perform every half hour. Al-Jazari's book also detailed several servant automatons and even a mechanical band. In the late 13th century, the advent of the fully mechanical clock resulted in the birth of mechanical figures. These complex timepieces were installed in cathedrals and palaces, often featuring human and animal figures springing to life to signify the arrival of an interval of time. The Renaissance also brought forth a host of mechanical innovations. Leonardo da Vinci designed several automatons, including a lion who could walk and a knight who could move multiple limbs. In the 17th century, French philosopher René Descartes was rumored to have designed automatons, including the unverifiable rumor that he had constructed one of a small child as a replacement for his young daughter, who had died of scarlet fever at the age of 5. While it is not known whether it was actually built, this is one of the first mentions of automata being used not simply to create life, but to resurrect it. In his writings, Descartes often grappled with the concept of automata, not simply speculating that machines could be made to appear as living organisms, but theorizing that living organisms might function no differently from machines. He believed that a perfect automata of an animal would be indistinguishable from a Descartes attempted to clarify in his argument that humans could never be fully replicated, outlining a test to distinguish man from machine. In this same discourse, Descartes coined his most famous idea, Je pense donc je suis, or in English, I think,
Therefore
therefore
I
I am.
am.
Living during the Inquisition, Descartes' writings on existentialism were radical and dangerous, and after hearing of Galileo's conviction by the Roman Catholic Church, Descartes chose to abandon publishing additional ideas on the subject. Descartes' writings on the line between man and machine would become even more
Hey, Space Policeman, what do you think about the announcements today about the clear Dragon Caesar and the pre-ordering of Alternative Destiny Don Kuga? Any thoughts on those? You gonna get either of those? I know we're both fans of Don Kuga. A little on the fence about it just because it's not transform though, I'll be honest. I had a Q-tip.
In 1738, French inventor Jacques de Vaucanson would set up an attraction in a grand showroom in Paris. Charging a fee to small groups, Vaucanson would present a new invention, an automaton unlike any the world had seen. Resembling Antoine Quosevau's marble statue, the flute-playing shepherd, Vaucanson's automaton was 5.5 feet tall, and it sat atop a 4.5-foot tall pedestal. Powered by weights, the shepherd could not only move, but it could perform, playing 12 different melodies on the flute. The instrument was not an illusion. The flute player blew air into a real flute, changing its fingering, mouth position, and wind speed to accurately play the music. This was achieved using a complex series of bellows, gears, and pipes, with most of the mechanisms being contained in the pedestal below the statue. The largest piece of the machine was a cylinder, known as a camshaft. The cylinder featured a series of ridges and bumps. Several cam followers read these as the cylinders rotated, synchronizing the many pieces to create the programmed movements. In order for the mechanical hands of the flute player to accurately finger the notes on the instrument, Vaucanson had to use real skin on the hands. Or maybe this was not necessary for the machine to play the instrument, and Vaucanson just wanted to use real skin on the hands. As impressive as the automaton was, he was also disconcerted.
That is such a
and
Kevin
not
line.
just because it used real skin on the hands. Musicians were worried of the machine's ramifications on their profession. Some criticized the automaton's technique, but many untrained listeners could not detect the faults. From a philosophical perspective, the machine was most notable for its human-like movement. Specifically, since it was made to play a wind instrument, Vaucanson had to design the device so that air would blow out of the figure's mouth. The result, as many pointed out, was that the figure literally breathed. The French writer Voltaire labeled Vaucanson the new Prometheus. The following year, Vaucanson debuted 2 additional automatons. Another musician, this one capable of playing the pipe and tabor, and a mechanical gold-plated duck. The duck was capable of several lifelike movements, including eating grain and defecating it. Vaucanson claimed that there was a complex chemical system that achieved the digestion, but it would be revealed a century later that it was merely a hidden compartment.
It's pretty. Yeah, it's pretty complicated. Gunper especially surprised me. After Valerios was a little simpler than I expected. Honestly, I don't know why. I was expecting it to be more than it is, but it just Valerius pretty basic. And I don't like the fact that the waist piece inside, you gotta pull it out. Not a fan of that. Wish it was on some kind of a arm to put it in position, but whatever. Might be too much to ask. It's just really hard to get out of the inside of the body, especially there's a small tab. well, let's demonstrate. If I try to pull it out, I lose the connector. I don't think it's intentional. This is not well designed. I guess it's supposed to reduce stress when you attach and detach it, but it's a bit of a pain. Don't like that aspect, but otherwise it's good. I might have to glue this part in here, I don't know. I do like the back main. I like the alternate tailpiece. Don't like the fact that the gray bits on the hips and legs, the joints there, are more flat than matte than metallic silver. But I could repair that if I wanted. But I looked at like the Soul of Chogokin and it's metallic silver. I'm like, oh, that's nice. Even the stock images of this one have it looking like metallic, so a little disappointed in that. But it's decent. I have to retract some of my praise for Atrouse. Some of the stickers on the underlegs are starting to peel. The ones that make the inner leg detailing, and the ones on the hips. I thought they would not need to be. I thought they would be good, but they are in fact going to be peeling and turning up from action. So I'll have to see if I can get those stuck in place. This Gunper is good so far, except for the fact that it's got the stickers on the lower legs, and also I sort of slightly bungled the sticker in the knee here. You can't really see, but it's off center, it's angled. Not a fan of that. Hang on. Apologies. One thing about being sick, I didn't bring tissues. Anyway, Gunper surprised me with its complexity, is the bottom line. But I don't like the stickers on the bottom of the feet, especially.
That would release dyed breadcrumbs to appear as feces. Shortly after debuting these machines, the plated duck. The duck was capable of several lifelike movements, including eating grain and defecating it. Wilkinson claimed that there was a complex chemical system that achieved the digestion, but it would be revealed a century later that it was merely a hidden compartment that would release dyed breadcrumbs to appear as feces. Shortly after debuting these machines, Wilkinson took a position in the French government and claimed to be working on his most advanced automaton yet, an anatomically correct human being. Wilkinson would never finish this work, abandoning the project after becoming disgusted by it, with no additional context given. Wilkinson's 3 automatons, which he sold and would continue to be displayed, were widely influential. French philosopher Julien Offray de la Mettrie would assert in his work L'homme machine, or Man a Machine, what René Descartes a century earlier did not, that humans are no different than animals, and that humans function no differently than a machine. His views, which made reference to Wilkinson's work, were seen as extremely controversial, and La Mettrie was forced to flee France because of them. Automatons continued to be innovated past Wilkinson. By 1774, Pierre-Jacques Audreau and his son Henri-Louis Jacques Audreau constructed 3 brilliant automatons: a musician capable of playing the organ, a writer capable of composing sentences, and a draftsman capable of drawing pictures. These automatons are remarkable for several reasons, most notably that they have survived and still function today. The mechanisms of the 3 figures are contained almost entirely within their bodies, a significant improvement on Wilkinson's figures, which relied on pedestals to conceal the machinery. Perhaps the most impressive and prophetic of any automaton from this era, the writer could be programmed to write any sentence without changing the inner workings of the figure. Within the boy's back, along a complex camshaft, existed the ability to write any letter, as well as spaces and punctuation. The shape of the letter key would change the position of the cam, so that the cam followers lined up with the corresponding letter. The result is one of the earliest programmable machines. Some of the most infamous sentences that the automaton was made to write over the years include references to Descartes' philosophical writings, including "I think, therefore I am," and the far more eerie "I do not think, therefore do I not exist." In 1769, Hungarian inventor Wolfgang von Kempelen debuted an automaton nicknamed the Turk. This automaton was touted as being an intelligent machine, capable of playing chess. The Turk toured the world, playing prominent chess players and dignitaries, including United States Ambassador Benjamin Franklin.
Never heard of him.
Usually won its match, astounding the opposing player and spectators. While containing some automata, the Turk was primarily a hoax, with a hidden chess player below, following the game above, and puppeteering the figure's arm. Some of Kempelen's other inventions achieved their intended purpose more legitimately. Over the course of 2 decades, Kempelen developed a speaking machine. Like Wilkinson's flute player, this device used bellows and manipulated airflow to manually reproduce the sounds of human speech. Kempelen was not the only one experimenting in speech synthesis during this era. French inventor Abbé Michel and engineer Christian Gottlieb Kratzenstein also developed machines that replicated the mechanics and resulting sounds
Oh, this hatch
of human
closes.
vocal cords, with Michel routing the sounds out of 2 sculpted heads. Michel and Kempelen's machines were capable of producing both vowel and consonant sounds, which some sources say could produce hundreds of words and speak multiple languages. French writer Antoine Rivarol, upon hearing the machines, wrote that the new technology would allow for the perfect preservation of 18th century French for the rest of time. Several reproductions of Kempelen's speaking machine have been created, so today we can hear exactly how the people of France sounded in the 1700s. French is a beautiful language. Over the coming centuries, other inventors attempted to improve on this design, attempting to build automata that could both move and speak like a human. For every significant feat in automata, there were thousands of other, less remarkable, but far more replicable automatons created and sold. Small music boxes with animated figures were created by skilled craftsmen and sold as luxury items. Birds were again a common staple of this art form, with wind-up boxes and miniature cages featuring singing mechanical avians. Automatons were created and distributed by people all over the world, resulting in this period, from the mid-1800s to the early 1900s, being referred to as the Golden Age of Automata. While the volume of mechanical figures would peak during this period, the complexity and innovation of the 18th century was rarely matched. In many ways, this age of automaton innovation had been ushered out by the Industrial Revolution. As journalist Gabby Wood explained, quote, "Makers of automata turned away from constructing curiosity in order to design the machines that would replace human labor. Apart from a few scattered attempts at making these industrial devices appear human, such as Diedrich's steam man, automaton innovation ceased. But this was not the end of humanity's pursuit for mechanical life, as the definition of automaton was soon given an additional qualifier: a moving mechanical device meant to resemble and imitate a living being without the use of electricity." In the late 19th century, humanity began the decades-long transition to a world based on electricity. This transformed practically every aspect of human existence, and it resulted in a class of inventions that appeared as miracles to the public. The electric age was dominated by two names, Nikola Tesla and Thomas Edison. Edison's electromechanical inventions would have an enormous impact on the future of automata, but the most immediate impact he would have on living machines was the invention of the phonograph, a device capable of recording and playing back sound. In 1877, the same year that Edison invented the machine, he began contemplating its commercial uses, speculating how it might be integrated into children's toys. Over a decade later, Edison hired a manufacturer to create and distribute a talking doll. This small figure had a miniature phonograph placed inside, with cylindrical wax records. When a child turned the crank, a voice would emit from inside of the doll, singing one of 12 songs. Some of these records have been preserved, and recently, the contents have been reproduced. Terrifying. The products were poorly designed and manufactured, and as a result, the dolls flopped, with Edison abandoning plans for a second generation. Shortly after the dolls failed, the phonograph's cylindrical records would be used in another entertainment device, fortune-telling machines. These figures had extremely limited movements, but their ability to play back different lines of dialogue produced a novelty that would become a staple of boardwalks and amusement parks. While not the most technically impressive, moving figures with human voices began to populate the world. This, along with other electrical innovations, elicited both wonder and fear from the public, sentiments that soon found a home in the emerging genre of science fiction. In 1920, Czech writer Karel Čapek wrote a play named RUR, in which artificial humans created for the purposes of labor rebel, resulting in the extinction of humanity. The play was a massive hit around the world, and is most famous for introducing the word robot. The play instilled a fear in the public of an apocalyptic robotic uprising, as well as further worries of intelligent machines displacing humans in the workforce. It also inspired many to experiment with robotics. Some of these early 20th century creations appeared in a humanoid shape, but were obviously machines, with visible screws and metal casing. While the robots in Čapek's play appeared as human, it would be these metal beings that would be commonly referred to as robots. Other inventors took a different approach. After watching Čapek's play, Japanese biologist Makoto Nishimura built his own robot, named Gakuten Soku. Nishimura's goal was to design a friendly machine that would be an optimistic companion to humanity, not a slave or an aggressor as the ones depicted in Čapek's play. Nishimura gave his robot skin made of rubber, and the machine was capable of moving its arms, turning its head, and most impressively, creating facial expressions. Gakuten Soku could smile by a mechanism that raised the corners of his mouth. This type of machine, that was wrapped in an artificial skin and made to appear as a human, would be more commonly referred to as an android. Robots and androids appeared frequently in media, but infrequently in reality over the coming decades. They were most often built to showcase a specific technology, not as an end product themselves. The creation of new, non-electric mechanical automatons was rare, and the surviving pieces had become antiques, fetching high prices from wealthy collectors. The products of a once thriving art form now sat, often frozen, in museums and antique stores throughout the world, a reminder of the promise of mechanical life, now seen by many as the limit. But it was in one of these antique stores that the next step in the search for a living machine would begin. In 1949, in an antique store in New Orleans, a preserved automaton of a bird perched inside of a golden cage performed once again, flapping its wings and whistling a song. The sudden change in state, from still to full of life, enamored its potential customer, a filmmaker from California, Walt Disney. Walt purchased the strange bird, and after returning home, he brought it into his studio's machine shop, handed it to one of his employees, and instructed him to open it up and figure out how it worked. At 47 years old,
Does not do what is good, is not follow is it good, which man is
At
constituted.
47 years old, famed cartoonist Walt Disney was beginning to lose his passion for animation. The 1940s had been a tumultuous decade at his studio. The animators' strike in 1941, the struggles during World War II, and the mixed reception to the studio's recent films had caused Walt to become disillusioned with the medium that had made him a household name. Adding to this discontentment, Walt was forced to quit the sport of polo after suffering a severe injury in 1938, depriving him of the hobby that he enjoyed outside of the studio. As a result, Walt was forced to redirect his energy toward new passions, and he began to gravitate toward one specific fascination: trains. A lifelong interest in locomotives was quickly becoming an obsession, one that he shared with several of his studio employees. Naturally, many of those that had a passion for trains were the machinists and technicians working at the Disney Studio machine shop. This department was tasked with developing many of the machines that were used in the animation process. In the late 1940s, Walt began to spend more time at the machine shop, discussing his growing collection of model trains with his new friends/employees. It was common for hobbyists to place their train sets within an environment made up of scale models. This might be why Walt began to develop a second fascination with sculpting miniatures. In 1949, Walt discovered the automaton bird in New Orleans, and it was at this point that all of his interests seemed to coalesce into a new type of project: a program show of moving mechanical miniatures, a type of three-dimensional animation that he would refer to as Disneylandia. Walt enlisted animator Ken Anderson, removing him from the Walt Disney Productions payroll and instead paying Anderson himself out of his own pocket. Anderson recalled that the pet project was, in part, derived out of Walt's frustrations with the other animators. Walt explained to Anderson, quote, "I'm tired of all you artists doing all the drawing and painting around here. You know, I can draw and paint myself. I'm going to do something creative too." Walt and Anderson worked together to design and sculpt a series of three-dimensional scenes. The intention was that each model would have programmed movement and synchronized sound. When a person inserted a coin into the machine, the models would come to life. The concepts that Walt and Anderson developed all had a similar style and tone, with the exhibits all featuring elements of nostalgia or Americana, with both Disney films and Norman Rockwell paintings serving as inspiration. The first Disneylandia scene that the two created depicted Granny Kincaid's cabin from the Disney film So Dear to My Heart. The scene featured Granny sitting in her chair, which would rock back and forth as dialogue and music played. Walt would assist in sculpting this scene, but as Anderson explained, he, quote, "wasn't any good at it," and Walt soon enlisted sculptor Charles Crisadoro to help with the project. Around the same time, Walt assigned the automaton bird to another animator and model train enthusiast, Wathel Rogers. Rogers was tasked with studying the automaton in and out. He pried open the bird's minuscule components, comparing it to deconstructing a piece of jewelry. When he was done inspecting the bird's innards, Rogers reconstructed the automaton so that it could perform once again. Satisfied with Rogers' work, Walt pulled him away from his animation duties, along with the head of the studio machine shop, Roger Broggie. Walt assigned Broggie and Rogers to another Disneylandia model, one that featured movement far more complex than that of Granny Kincaid's cabin. The new scene, nicknamed Project Little Man, was to feature a 9-inch high performer dancing on a stage. Walt asked actor and dancer Buddy Ebsen to come into the studio to record a performance, filming Ebsen on a grid so that the animators could study his movements. As was common with automata, Rogers and Broggie utilized a large camshaft to program the figure's movements. When a bump was registered on the surface, a wire was moved to create a single action, such as the lifting of a foot. Anderson would construct a third Disneylandia scene, depicting a barbershop quartet singing in a barbershop. With several proofs of concept in the works, Walt proposed a way to showcase the models around the country. His plan was to place the exhibits, and you'll never believe this, on a train. The models would be installed in Pullman train cars, and viewers in cities around the United States would be able to travel to their train station to see the exhibit. Rogers, Broggie, and Anderson were able to get multiple prototypes to work, including the small figure in Project Little Man, which did appear to dance. However, the machines were severely limited by several factors. For one, programming the movements by adjusting the ridges on the camshaft was tedious and frustrating. The number of movements and the length of the performance was limited to the size of the camshaft. The camshaft also had to be placed close to the figure, and Broggie and Rogers had already made it quite large. After months of work, the team felt that they had met the limits of the technology and their own ability. Broggie explained to Walt that they were, quote, "no further advanced than the 17th and 18th century kings of France who had commissioned the creation of little automatons that played musical instruments." It was an unfortunate reality. You will never do anything better than an 18th century monk when you have a TV in your house. Even if Rogers and Broggie had dedicated the time necessary to master the craft of automata, the complexity of Walt's request was simply not achievable within the medium. Broggie proposed a solution. If Walt were to make a life-sized human figure, then more modern and advanced mechanisms could be placed inside of the body. This would result in more detail and lifelike movements. Walt considered the possibilities of Broggie's suggestion and responded to the idea with one of his most commonly spoken phrases: no. The point of the miniatures, according to Walt, was that they are cute. They were magical because they were small. Making them life-size would defeat the purpose of the exhibits. Besides, magical because they were small, making the miniatures with one of his most commonly spoken phrases, no. The point of the miniatures, according to Walt, was that they are cute. They were magical because they were small. Making them life-size would defeat the purpose of the exhibits. Besides, it was determined that the project was far too expensive, as the income generated by the coin-operated machines would not offset the projected maintenance costs. This might have been more demoralizing to Walt if he was not already working on another project, one with a similar tone, similar goals, and soon, a similar name to Disneylandia. It was to be an amusement park with elaborate themed environments and immersive storytelling. Walt had been dreaming of a place like it for years because he wanted to create a place where parents and children could have fun together, and/or he wanted another, bigger train. Disneyland Park opened on July 17, 1955. The theme park was designed by WED Enterprises, a new company that Walt had staffed mainly by poaching employees from his studio. Several of these artists and engineers were those that had been recruited to work on Disneylandia, including Anderson, Broggie, and Rogers. These designers would eventually be given the unique title of Imagineer. Over several years, Walt and the Imagineers worked diligently, designing a theme park unlike the world had ever seen. When guests first entered Disneyland, they were able to wander through nostalgic environments and ride unique attractions. They would also have the opportunity to interact with classic Disney characters, such as Mickey Mouse, Minnie Mouse, Black Bart, the Phantom of the Opera, the Main Street Monkey, Aunt Jemima, and Goofy. Along with these costumed characters, guests would encounter several mechanical characters throughout their Disneyland day. In Fantasyland, dark rides themed to Disney's animated films featured simple animated figures. These characters had minimal looped movement, and each was seen only briefly as the ride vehicles whipped around the track. In Frontierland, along the shores of the rivers of America, a Native American village featured multiple animated human figures, including a chief mounted on a horse. This figure was capable of raising its arm to guests as they passed by on the riverboat. But by far the most impressive examples of mechanical life in early Disneyland could be found on a single ride in Adventureland, the Jungle Cruise.
9:14.
Since the earliest concepts of the park, Walt had envisioned a boat ride themed to the dense river jungles of the world. Originally, Walt wanted actual wild animals to live on the shores of the attraction, but abandoned the concept because of its logistical hurdles and guest-killing potential. Instead, Walt and the Imagineers opted to build detailed figures capable of movement. Unlike the exaggerated animal designs found in Disney's famous animations, the Jungle Cruise animals were carefully sculpted and painted to appear as real animals, and the mechanisms held within them assisted in this illusion. These animals could wiggle, lunge, nod, chomp, and bite, and chew, and chomp, and bite. The way in which these figures moved was less precise than the detailed cam work of the Disneylandia figures, but what the animals lacked in complexity, they made up for in size and creative staging. The most common mechanisms found in the Jungle Cruise animals were cams and levers, and cranks and sliders. Both have the ability to turn rotary motion into linear motion, allowing for a constant short program to be looped indefinitely. Many of the attraction's land animals contained all of their mechanisms internally and could be seen in full view. Others, such as the original giraffes, cheated a bit. Only the long necks and heads of the animals could be seen peeking out above the foliage, while the mechanisms below were hidden by the brush. A similar example of this staging could be found in the rhino scene, in which two baby rhinos ran around and played. This was accomplished by only building the top half of each animal, allowing the bottom half to contain wheels that would run along a track. The most unique mechanisms of the Jungle Cruise were not found within the ride's jungle, but rather they were submerged in the attraction's river. To allow guests to have close encounters with several semi-aquatic animals, large metal structures were constructed and installed before the river was filled. In order for hippos to emerge from beneath the water, the sculpted figures were attached to metal carriages that accordioned up, enough for the figure to go from completely submerged to visible above the waterline. The ride skipper would shoot the hippos with a gun loaded with blanks, one of the first examples of a machine being used to simulate both life and
Congratulations. As far as games go, I am fighting the Ing Emperor in Prime 2 hard mode, and he's winning. I can get up to the third stage, but I can't do enough damage before he takes me out. I'm missing something in the strategy. You ever played it? For shame. For shame, good sir. Bro, that's like still the beginning of the game. I guess that's technically in the Torvis area, but... Shame on you. I don't know why the bot's reading everything twice. Anyway. Shame. The dark beam is not long before the light beam. You basically get them back to back. You use a dark beam to go into dark ether, you wander around a bit, you find the light beam, you make your way back to light ether, then you proceed. That's all before you get to the first guardian. Shame. Some Metroid player you are. Have you played Prime 3? Okay, that's good. What about the first one, Prime 1? Or remastered? Okay, I mean... Well, if you can't beat 2, it's not a sure thing, so I don't know. Nice. I have not beaten Prime Hunters ever. That one I get walled at like a part where you're facing off against multiple of the other bounty hunters at once. So that doesn't help. Hunters was on the Wii U. Yeah. Yeah, that game is finger cramping the game. Hand cramping the game. Oh, so that was supposed to be... Oh. No wonder. So this is... Okay. Okay, I forget what I did wrong earlier. So this is a little handle that that goes underneath the Gunper, and you can pull it out and twist it around, and Ultraus can hang onto it. I was like, man, it's really hard to pull off on this one. I can't get it out of here. How am I supposed to get this out? I had to end up using screwdrivers. And what happened is I took there's a little tab here that I thought was part of the gate, and I cut it off. So no wonder. Oh well. I can get it out with pliers, whatever. It's not the end of the world. I'm hardly ever going to use it. It is what it is. But yeah. Hunters is a bitch, and I've never touched, what's the one they did for, the first one they did for 3DS? Federation Force. I've never touched that. I ought to get that eventually. Just to say I've played it. Also, I've never beaten pinball, because I'm just not great at pinball in general. Which? Pinball or Federation Force? It's fun enough. Because I've played it idly. I was like... I need to try it to say I have. If I can play Other M, I can play Federation Force. Yeah, that was my attitude in 2016. Time has mellowed me out a little bit. Like, we've got more Metroid games now. We've got Samus Returns, we've got Dread. So, I can deal with it and kind of love it, but it happens. It's a thing that exists. Still don't like this. This is an entire sticker over a piece. You can support them later too. It's okay. I mean, haven't bought a new game in quite a while. I mean, after getting the PS4 from you, I bought a bunch of games for it. I've played 3 or 4. I've played maybe 3 or 4 of the Wii games I bought out of like 10 or so, the Switch games I bought out of about 8 or so. I guess I've technically touched all of them, but haven't beaten some. But yeah. I'll give you that one. Shantae is probably worth it. Alright, that's fair. I need to get back to Shantae. Excuse me. Did I mention I'm sick? How dare you tell me to die? You're supposed to tell me to unalive myself. Get with the times, Vertex. There we go. I'm messing with you, by the way. I assume you know that, but just to put that out there. Not a fan of the doublespeak people have adopted. I get in some cases it's necessary because of algorithms being shitty, but yeah. Okay, and then this goes into here. And sticker 18 goes on the inside here. Anyway, games. Mentioned Shantae. I still have not beaten that first Shantae. Granted, I only picked it back up recently after like 2 years of sitting on it, so I'm not in the greatest spot, but I need to do that. Okay, that's that, and this will tab onto the foot here. Well, that surprises me. I feel like you should play it once, just for posterity. Like I said, I've played the original Metroid once. Do I ever plan to play it again? Probably not, but I can say I've done it. Anyway, I imagine it would be worth a decent amount, decent chunk of change. Alright, and then here's my other cross. Okay. And then I build the other hand. Gunper is coming together. Just gonna build the other arm. That's fair. That is quite fair.
Death. This famous scene would have been very interesting in the version of the ride where this was a real animal. Some lucky guests even got to witness Walt Disney fire the gun at the mechanical figure, a bespoke experience in which you could visit Disneyland and see Walt Disney fire a gun.
Well, there's a beat the Aztecs never heard of.
It would be like going to Walgreens and seeing Charles R. Walgreen fire a gun. Other aquatic figures included the charging crocodiles, which rolled along a hidden looping track. These clever illusions resulted in an attraction that was full of animal life. As a result, The Jungle Cruise was seen as Disneyland's most impressive attraction when the park debuted. In the years following Disneyland's opening, the Imagineers would add more exotic animals to the Jungle Cruise, as well as populate Frontierland's wilderness with similar creatures native to North America. The area's train ride, the Rainbow Caverns Mine Train, was updated to the new Mine Train Through Nature's Wonderland, which featured scenes of elk fighting, beavers building dams, and bears scratching on a tree. The area also featured figures in the water, including fish jumping out of the river and bears swimming and eating fish. The plussing of both the Jungle Cruise and the Mine Train were led by Mark Davis, an animator that Walt was consistently recruiting to work on Disney attractions. Davis was accepted.
Yeah, that's where I've got it. I've got the Switch copy. And I'm content with that. But I know it's a franchise near and dear to you. So by all means, get the physical hardware. Original physical hardware. I've thought about doing that for Metroid. But it's never followed through. Nice. That's cool. There you go. More reasons to get a GBA. Oh, pfft. I threw this away before I was done with it. I was like, where's those pieces I'm supposed to have?
exceptionally gifted in his ability to turn simple movements into realistic and often humorous scenes. While Disneyland's environments were coming to life with a plethora of artificial animals, Walt began to explore new concepts for attractions in which mechanical humans would be the star. Throughout the late 1950s, two new themed areas were being considered for Disneyland. Both of these would be additions to Main Street USA, and both would feature shows starring animated human figures as their primary attraction. One proposal, named Liberty Street, would have been themed to colonial America. The main attraction of this area was to be a show named One Nation Under God, that would include the Hall of Presidents, a stage in which figures of every U.S. president would come to life. Another proposed annex of Main Street was named Edison Square. This area would have been focused on the emergence of electricity, juxtaposing Main Street's nostalgic gas lamps with a street full of electric lights. The main attraction of Edison Square would have been Harnessing the Lightning. This show would have tracked the progress of electricity throughout the 20th century, focusing on multiple scenes of a family demonstrating advances in household appliances. The challenge with both attractions would be animating the life-sized human figures. The Imagineers were aware of the mechanical limitations, and both shows were planned with limited movement in mind. Both One Nation Under God and Harnessing the Lightning would utilize dynamic lighting, so that not every animated figure was visible at once. This would allow each character to be revealed throughout a sequence, cutting down on the amount of time that a guest could see a figure's animation loop. The Hall of Presidents segment of One Nation Under God had the advantage of scale. 33 presidents would be depicted at once, so even if each had only the ability to turn their heads, the crowd effect would hide the rudimentary motion. Harnessing the Lightning would have had guests walk from room to room between acts, and each act would have been short, around 3 minutes each. The characters would have been staged to hold household appliances, which would allow them to perform machine-like movements while still appearing human. To further help with the illusion, Imagineer John Hench suggested that the humans be depicted in a caricaturized style, to prevent them from coming across as lifeless. These solutions would help to sell the illusion of life, even if the show were to use mechanisms as crude as those found on the Jungle Cruise. Still, this was a compromise to Walt's vision for both shows, and despite the Imagineers dedicating years of work to both Liberty Street and Edison Square, neither concept would come to fruition. Instead, Walt focused the park's funds and the Imagineers' energy on other expansions, such as a major addition to the Tomorrowland section of the park. But the idea of attractions with human figures lingered. The technology just wasn't there. At least, not yet. What happened next is a bit uncertain. It was at this point, around 1959, that the Studio Machine Shop began experimenting with building a mechanical human head. The first head to be created was of a man of Chinese descent. There are 3 theories as to why this occurred. In the most popular account of events, Walt walked into the Studio Machine Shop one day with a new idea, another new themed area for Main Street USA. He said, quote, "Look, I want to have a Chinese restaurant at the park. Out in the lobby will be an old Chinese fellow like Confucius. Not an actor, but a figure made out of plastic. Now the customers will ask him questions, and he'll reply with words of wisdom." While at first, this seems random, fortune-telling machines were abundant, and a few were already in Disneyland. Fortune-telling machines often depicted Confucius or another Eastern philosopher, so the idea of a Chinatown with a fortune-telling Confucius could be a natural evolution of this common fixture of amusement parks. The second theory is that machinist Jack Gladish was experimenting with a talking head in the Studio Machine Shop, either as his own personal project, or because Walt had assigned it to him in preparation for one of the complex shows in development. According to historian Todd James Pierce, Gladish built a functioning prototype skull. However, when it came time to place the fake skin on the head, the latex material did not fit properly around the eyes. The figure appeared to them to be of Chinese descent, and so Gladish and the machine shop decided to proceed with the imperfection and pretend as though it was purposeful. After presenting it to Walt, the Chinatown concept was invented to support the team's progress on the figure. The third theory as to why a Chinese head was developed is that Disneyland was simply missing something. It already had caricatures and fear-based depictions of Africans and Native Americans, but it had no such material for the people of Asia. Therefore, a Chinese figure was developed to address this racist omission, as in an omission of racism, not an omission that was racist. Regardless of the reason, a mechanical figure was designed for a proposed Chinese restaurant. The theory that Roger Broggie had proposed almost a decade prior was turning out to be correct. A larger figure did indeed allow for more lifelike movement. The machine shop was able to fit multiple solenoids inside of the mechanical head. A solenoid is an electromagnetic mechanism created by winding a copper wire into a coil. When electricity passes through the wire, a magnetic field is created, pulling the plunger into the coil. When the current is interrupted, a spring returns the plunger to its resting position. The benefit of solenoids are that they are small, fast, and easily controlled with electricity. The downside is that their load capacity is limited, making them less suitable for lifting heavy objects compared to other methods. For the mechanical head, this was not an issue, as the solenoids would be used for simple, small movements, such as the opening of the mouth or the raising of the cheeks. Walt wanted realism out of the head from the beginning, suggesting specific facial expressions and complex mouth movements. Walt explained to the team, quote, "You know they've done this in Europe for hundreds of years. If they've done this well, we can do things now much better." He instructed the team to watch television with the sound turned off, in order to study the way that people's mouths moved when they spoke. Waithel Rogers recalled, quote, "You could always tell who was working on the job. They never looked at your eyes when you were talking to them, always at your mouth." One of the most significant obstacles the Imagineers faced with the mechanical figure was the skin. The latex used for the initial prototypes was not flexible or durable enough to last on the talking head, and Imagineer Harriet Burns had to constantly create new skin when one inevitably peeled and deteriorated. The Imagineers soon turned to a unique hot melt vinyl named Duraflex, which had properties that more closely resembled the flexibility and durability of human skin. The material also lent itself better to repairs if an issue did arise. While the mechanically inclined studio shop designed the Chinese head, the creatives at WED began to write the show for the Chinese restaurant. Disneyland performer Wally Bogue was recruited to help develop the attraction, which would feature several mechanical characters to support the Confucius figure. After guests had finished their meal, a dragon statue mounted to the wall of the dining room would suddenly come to life and speak. The voice would have been Bogue doing a stereotypical Chinese accent. The dragon would say, quote, "Honorable patrons look very happy. Must have been something you ate." The show's main character would have been the Chinese human figure. Confucius was used as a reference, but the character itself would have been a fictional philosopher. One of the proposed names for the character was Grandfather Chung, as Disney hoped to secure
it's got to
sponsorship
stand
from
about
canned
there.
Chinese food brand
I
Chun
don't
King.
understand on my
Although
right
this pitch would not
now.
have been helped
Actually,
by the fact that they misspelled Chun. The other name considered for the restaurant's
don't
wise
look at me.
sage was
Excuse me.
Chu Well. The philosopher would have been surrounded by mechanical birds, who would coo and sing as he delivered his philosophical teachings. He would begin his discourse with, quote, "Now that you have dined on food, it is time to dine on knowledge." Walt wanted the figure to be operated live by a hidden performer, who would respond to questions from the audience. The Imagineers might have determined that this would be more difficult than creating a programmed show. To address Walt's suggestion, they planned to pipe audio of canned audience questions into the room, in the hopes of fooling the real diners into believing that another patron had posed the question. For instance, a pre-recorded voice of a young girl would ask the philosopher why her father thinks that she talks too much, to which the philosopher would respond, quote, "Every young girl should be the picture of her mother, but not the soundtrack." Another line of wisdom from the philosopher was, quote, "Psychology books very handy if applied right, suggest 3 brisk strokes overhead of child." A white man doing his version of a Chinese accent while delivering jokes about child beating would have absolutely murdered a crowd in 1950s Disneyland, but it would not have the opportunity due to Walt's sudden and swift cancellation of the Chinatown area of the park. Despite the project being far into development, Walt apparently met with the team and declared, quote, "We're not going to do Chinatown. San Francisco and Los Angeles already have Chinatowns. There's no need for one at Disneyland." Chinatown and its restaurants
Just a picture of California Adventure.
figure would not cease. The progress made on the mechanical head had convinced Walt to move forward with One Nation Under God, focusing the attention of the Imagineers on the show's proposed star, a winkin', blinkin' Abraham Lincoln.
This panel does not sit very flush. Very tight.
In 1860, sculptor Leonard Wells Vogt convinced the Republican nominee for president, Abraham Lincoln, to visit his studio in Chicago. Lincoln agreed to allow Vogt to create a life mask, a plaster cast of his head and face. This was a common practice at the time, and the most accurate method of capturing the likenesses of prominent figures for use in busts and sculptures. Vogt applied the thick plaster to Lincoln's face, waited 1 hour,
These other
and asked
hands.
him to remove the mold. Lincoln took hold of the mask and began peeling it off his skin. The unique shape of Lincoln's cheekbones made the removal difficult, and several hairs that caught in the mold had to be pulled before the mask could be taken off. Despite this, the mask was clean and in one piece. Volk was now in possession of the only life mask of the man that would soon become the 16th president and one of the most prominent figures in American history. Volk would send a copy of the cast to his son's art teacher, John Leon Giraud in Paris, who gave it to another sculptor, Truman H. Bartlett. Volk would give the original cast to his son, who would give it to his friend, Wyatt Eaton. Years later, magazine editor Richard Watson Gilder would raise money through his subscribers to buy the cast from Eaton to donate to the National Museum. As a perk, each subscriber would receive a casting from the original. Over the next 75 years, casts would be circulated and duplicated, bought and sold, until eventually, one landed in the hands of Los Angeles-based wax museum owner, Catherine Stuber. Around 1960, Stuber was approached by a Disney artist named Blaine Gibson. Gibson was a sculptor himself, and he was very interested in Lincoln's life mask, as well as the process that Stuber used to create her figures. Stuber was hesitant, assuming that Walt Disney was going to create a wax museum in Disneyland. She told Gibson, quote, "If I tell you all this stuff, you're going to compete with me." Gibson eased her concerns. Walt was not interested in creating a wax museum with the Lincoln mask. He was interested in something much different. The advancements on the mechanical heads had rekindled the development of the One Nation Under God show and the Hall of Presidents. Walt hired James Alger, a documentarian who directed Disney's True Life Adventure series, to draft a script for the show. Alger wrote and recorded a 32-minute narration for the proposed attraction, and Walt began presenting it, along with several pieces of concept art, to potential sponsors. While the presentation was impressive, no company would agree to a partnership based on the script and drawings alone. Walt believed to secure financial support, he needed a prototype of one of the animated figures. Walt needed a functioning mechanical president. Walt briefly considered starting with George Washington or Teddy Roosevelt, but he instead chose to move forward with his favorite commander-in-chief. Walt Disney had developed an admiration for Abraham Lincoln at an early age, and his interest in the 16th president had followed him into adulthood. Walt was well read on Lincoln, and those close to him attested that his knowledge on the subject was impressive. It was no surprise that when given the opportunity to begin work on a single president, Walt chose Lincoln. The Imagineers started by constructing Lincoln's head, picking up where they had left off with the Chinese philosopher. Blaine Gibson sculpted the figure's face, using the life mask as reference. Skin was created, again using the Duraflex material, and glass eyes and false teeth were sourced to bring realism to the mechanical president. While sculptors and machinists worked on the physical construction of the figure, other members of the team began experimenting with an equally important element, a programming system. Up until this point, the talking heads created by the Imagineers had been operated live with joysticks and similar manual controls. Some of these control mechanisms were custom built, utilizing technology that had been developed for aviation. Despite being state-of-the-art at the time, these controls were clunky and unreliable, and the method was only suitable for testing and demonstration. For One Nation Under God and other shows, the goal was to create an entire stage play that could be activated at the push of a button and played dozens of times per day. The Imagineers needed a way to record, store, and play back the figure's movements. The first attempt at such a system was developed by Jack Gladish, and utilized two things that were abundant at the Disney studio: film stock and moviolas. Moviolas were film editing machines that allowed an editor to play back the film while working, but Gladish would use them for an entirely different purpose. Instead of exposing the film stock to light and capturing a series of images, Gladish simply used the film as a canvas. On the surface of the film, Gladish brushed conductive silver paint. He then attached a connection to the moviola, so that when the reel was played, the contact would graze the film's surface. When the silver paint would touch the contact, a circuit would be closed, causing a solenoid to be activated, resulting in a single action. When the circuit was absent, the circuit would open, causing the solenoid to return to its resting position. This ingenious, albeit crude method was already far better than the programming systems that most automatons used. The duration of a camshaft program was only as long as it took for the cylinder to complete one rotation, while Gladish's film stock method could fit hundreds of feet of programmed information onto a single reel. Multiple shows could be created and swapped out by simply changing the reel of film, with no need to change the mechanisms of the animated figure. Unfortunately, the system also had plenty of issues. For one, the silver paint began to chip rather quickly, and the program needed to be repainted constantly. Second, this was not an efficient way to store information. Only 6 tracks of paint could be placed onto a single reel, meaning that only 6 movements could be programmed onto each moviola. Walt was constantly asking that Lincoln be capable of performing additional complex movements, which meant more
Make the
mechanisms,
sword
and
here.
therefore more tracks needed to control them. If this method were to be used for Lincoln, an entire room of moviolas would need to be dedicated to the programming. If it were to be used for all of the presidents, an entire warehouse of moviolas would be required, each of which needed to be synchronized perfectly with one another at every single show. Flash's system was a huge step forward, but a more advanced system would still need to be developed for the attraction. Walt continued to request that additional nuances be installed in Lincoln's face, and as a result, the head was becoming quite heavy. This clashed with another of Walt's requests, that Lincoln would start each show seated and then rise from his chair to deliver a speech. Walt enlisted Mark Davis to work on the figure, having him focus on all of the mechanisms below the neck. Davis already had an interest in human anatomy, and after joining the team, he began studying prosthetic technology.
All right. Here for your consideration are the three components of Daltanious. Okay. That scared me. Oh, I see. One of them has a peg in it. Okay.
Davis recalled that, quote, it was the British who had done the most work on prosthetics, how to make an artificial hand or an artificial leg, because Britain had been bombed so heavily that there were more people in need of that there than in other countries. Davis compiled his research into a booklet. This was filled with theories and sketches of how the team might accomplish animating Lincoln. Davis explained, quote, it was rough, and the most terrible thing was that Walt wanted Lincoln to be pretty sophisticated. We didn't have the technology for it. I have a notebook that I did, How to Build a Mechanical Man, and all of this was wrong. We weren't building a mechanical man. We were building an illusion of man. That took a while to soak into me, and into everybody else. In 1960, Walt began negotiating with major corporations to build Disney attractions at the 1964 New York World's Fair. This was an opportunity to showcase the talent of the Disney organization to East Coast audiences and develop new technology for Disneyland using sponsorship money. Walt was interested in finding a sponsor for One Nation Under God and debuting the attraction at the fair. However, the Imagineers informed him that the technology necessary to operate the entire Hall of Presidents show was at least 5 to 10 years away. Development continued on the animated figure as Walt sought to secure partnerships for other attractions at the fair. At the same time, Walt and the Imagineers continued to make improvements to Disneyland. In early 1960, Disneyland management flagged the Pavilion restaurant as a venue in need of a refurbishment. Since the restaurant straddled Main Street USA and Adventureland, the theming was inconsistent throughout the dining space and the menu. To solve this, Walt tasked his Imagineers with creating a tea room themed to Polynesia. John Hench drew concept art of the space, and the art prominently featured birds in cages suspended above the heads of diners. Walt rejected the idea, believing that the birds would defecate in the guests' food. Hench pivoted and claimed that the birds in the art were actually mechanical birds. This idea was approved, and development on the Enchanted Tiki Room began. The restaurant borrowed many elements from the Chinatown restaurant concept, including the format of the dinner show and the use of programmed animated figures, as automaton makers had been doing for thousands of years.
I haven't assembled it yet. Still, they're pretty voluminous, yeah. So here, Atros can hold on to Gunper like so. stand so I can pose you. I've got some around, but just not on right here. Alright. Then let me pause for a minute and go get a stand just so I can properly display them. I'll be right back. Alright, I'm back and I got some stands. Let's put a stand on Gunper.
Imagineers took advantage of the unique properties of birds, finding it much easier and quicker to achieve lifelike movement with the tiki birds than the Lincoln figure. Still, Walt demanded more naturalism than had ever been achieved with mechanical birds. Specifically, he wanted the birds to be able to puff out their chest as they sang. This was a particularly difficult task for designer Harriet Burns, who had to find a fabric that allowed for this motion. As with the talking heads, solenoids would be utilized. These were placed inside of the bird's back and would give the birds the ability to quickly open and close their beaks. However, solenoids were too jarring and limited to provide all of the realistic movements that the Imagineers wanted to achieve. To accomplish fluid motions, pneumatic
What's
tubes
the purpose of
using
these?
pressurized air were designed. The pressurized air system would be housed outside of the showroom, and tubes would be routed into the mechanical birds. This allowed for stronger, slower motion, which the Imagineers could easily customize by changing the pressure of each individual action. Like the solenoids, these mechanisms were digital, meaning that there were only two states, activated and resting. A joystick control was created for the birds, revealing the range of motion of the fully articulated characters. The joystick control had two buttons, one on the top of the handle that puffed the bird's chest, and one on the base that opened the bird's beak. Tilting the top of the handle forward nodded the bird's head. Pushing the entire lever tilted the bird's body, and rotating the handle side to side turned the bird's head. A few of the bird's movements were designed so that it had two extreme activated positions, with a resting position in the middle. For instance, while the joystick control and the pneumatic pressure gave the appearance that an operator could turn the bird's head gradually in either direction, in reality there were only three positions: resting, which in this case was looking forward, activated left, and activated right. The movement could not be stopped between these positions. Thanks to these advancements, the Imagineers were building the animated figures for the Tiki Room restaurant quicker, cheaper, and more predictably than any of the mechanical human figures. Because of this, the dinner show starring the singing tropical birds was fast-tracked through development. The only missing component was a reliable system to record and playback the performance. The necessary breakthrough finally came thanks to a unique collaboration between several departments at the Disney studio, with the sound engineers, electricians, and machinists working together to create a custom programming system for the figures. This new method controlled the animation, not with paint, but with sound tones. In order to understand how this worked, it is necessary to understand the basics of sound recording. Sound is produced by vibrations. Human ears have a thin layer of skin, referred to as the eardrum, that responds to these vibrations and converts them into electrical signals. These signals are sent to the brain, where they are processed as a sound. In order to replicate this process using a machine, a mechanical eardrum, known as a diaphragm, responds to the sound waves, and this movement is converted into an electrical signal. The electrical signal travels along a wire and to a recording head. The recording head passes over a tape coated with a magnetic material. As it does, the electrical signal alters the orientation of the magnetic particles, imprinting the signal onto the tape and recording the sound. For playback, the process is reversed, with a playhead reading the stored magnetic information, converting it back into an electrical signal, and sending it to a diaphragm. This diaphragm vibrates, producing the sound that emits from a speaker. This process of recording sound has more uses than simply audio playback, and the engineers at the Disney studio devised a way to utilize this technology to create a system to control the animated figures.
Thank you.
Instead of using a microphone to capture sound waves and convert them into electrical signals, the live controls that the engineers were using, such as the joysticks, already controlled the figures using electrical signals. Just like sound, these signals could be recorded and stored onto a magnetic tape. If the signals from the live controls were played through a speaker, they would likely not sound pleasant, producing fuzzy, buzzing tones similar to electrical noise. Instead of sending this electrical signal through a playback head and to a speaker, the signal could be sent to a machine. This way, the Imagineers could use it to program the mechanical figures. When a tone was detected, it would activate a mechanism on the figure. This system functions similarly to the silver paint method, but the process was already a significant improvement. For one, the magnetic tape would not play.
Gotta move around to get a picture of these. Hang on.
Additionally, the Imagineers could now program the figures' movements in real time, as opposed to before, when they were estimating the timing when painting with the silver. Magnetic tape recording had been around for decades by this point, and recent advancements had made the process more efficient. Master tapes were now often separated into 8 different tracks, meaning that 8 actions could be easily programmed onto a single master tape. This was already an improvement over the 6 actions of the silver paint method, but still not nearly enough to program a single figure, let alone a stage full of them. The Imagineers needed to fit multiple actions on a single track of audio. Luckily, a method to do this had already been created by
What is this
aerospace
sticker go
engineers
to?
who developed the technology for
Number
aviation
28.
and the space
Did I
race.
miss something?
To understand this process, it is necessary to understand a bit more about sound waves. Sound waves are characterized by amplitude and frequency. When visualized, amplitude is the height of the wave and determines the amount of energy that the wave carries. In sound, this translates to loudness and volume. Raise the amplitude, the sound becomes louder. Lower the amplitude, the sound becomes quieter. Frequency is the number of cycles the sound wave makes per second, measured in hertz. In sound, this affects the character of the noise. A higher frequency is perceived as a higher pitch or tone. A lower frequency is perceived as a lower pitch or tone. A simple sine wave such as this would result in a single consistent tone, which is very rare in nature. Most sounds are made up of many waves of varying frequencies that combine into a complex wave. For instance, if 3 tones occur at once, one with a low frequency, one with a mid-range frequency, and one with a high frequency, the resulting compound wave would look like this. More complex sounds, such as a fully orchestrated music track or the human voice, have even more detailed sound waves. This combining effect is a natural occurrence, so the Imagineers could easily place multiple sounds onto a single track. When recording the figures, the Imagineers assigned each action its own frequency. For instance, the tongue on the mechanical head might be controlled by a tone with a frequency of 350 Hz, while the corners of the mouth might be controlled by a tone of 400 Hz. The sound engineers needed to distribute the frequencies throughout the tape's recording range, so that there was enough buffer between the actions to avoid interference. After all of the frequencies were recorded, they would naturally form a compound sound wave. But the individual information was not lost. It just needed to be decoded. The method to separate the actions on playback required a set of metal reeds, arranged in a bank. This appeared similar to a xylophone, and the process was not dissimilar to the musical instrument. In a xylophone, each key produces a different tone, determined by the size and shape of the key. In the reed bank, each metal reed is tuned to respond to a different tone. When a reed registered its resonant frequency, it vibrated, closing a circuit and triggering an action. For instance, if the Imagineers chose to control the corners of the mouth using a frequency of 400 Hz, a metal reed would be created to respond to frequencies of 400 Hz, and this reed would be connected to the circuit that controlled the corners of the mouth. The electric sound signal from the master tape was sent to the entire reed bank. Each reed listened to the entire range of sound, but could only respond to their assigned frequencies. This new method allowed for 10 to 20 actions per track, meaning that an 8-track master tape could have as many as 160 actions on it. The animated figures that utilized this system of audio tones were given the name audio animatronics. The term animatronics is a combination of animation and electronics, but the audio part has a disputed etymology. The most common explanation is that the audio in audio animatronics refers to the sound that emits from or near the figure. The fact that the animated figures can produce sound and synchronize their movements with it is what makes them audio animatronics. Sometimes, though, Disney and the Imagineers working on the project have said that the audio in audio animatronics is derived from the fact that the figures are controlled by audio tones. To illustrate this confusion, here's a clip of Walt Disney and a bird disagreeing on the origin of the term.
Audio for sound.
See, and electronically animated by sound. That's what he's trying to say.
While 160 actions might seem like more than the Imagineers would need, it was still not enough to control an entire show. On top of the animated figures' actions, space needed to be dedicated to the program's audio tracks and lighting controls. The final piece for addressing this issue would be another system created outside of the Disney studio, a technology developed not for entertainment, but for nuclear war. The Imagineers utilized systems originally invented for the Polaris submarine-launched ballistic missile. There are mixed reports on exactly how Disney acquired this technology, and what exactly the technology was. Some sources claim that the information had been declassified. Some say that Walt purchased the patents from private companies, and a few imply that Walt might have been given the information by his internal contacts within the US government. That said, it was not a secret that Disney was utilizing technology developed for Polaris. In fact, the primary source that they used it at all was Walt himself, who explained in interviews that, quote, if the government hadn't done all the research, it would have cost us a fortune to develop the system. This made for a great headline, but the exact technology borrowed from the nuclear missiles was more practical than it was compelling. Most reports indicate that the technology that derived from Polaris was a 14-track tape system. This nearly doubled the number of actions that could be used in a show. Finally, the system could handle the amount of programmable material that the Imagineers required. There was just one more feature needed to bring the animatronics, specifically Lincoln, to life. In order for the Lincoln animatronic to rise from his chair, hydraulics would be implemented into his frame. Hydraulics are mechanisms that use the pressure of fluid to achieve movements. This was the best option for heavy machinery, as unlike magnets or air pressure, hydraulic fluid does not noticeably compress when force is applied. Hydraulics would allow Lincoln to accomplish demanding tasks, such as standing up and lifting his arms. They also had another key advantage over solenoids and pneumatics. Hydraulics could perform continuous analog movements, while solenoid and pneumatic valves were only capable of binary or digital movements. Hydraulic valves could be made to stop at any point between its two extremes. This required a slight variation in the programming method. While the pneumatics and solenoids responded to the presence or absence of a tone, the hydraulics responded to a change in voltage. A resting position for each movement was determined, along with a corresponding resting voltage. When the voltage was increased, the mechanism would move in one direction in response. If the voltage stayed at that level, the mechanism would remain in that position. If the voltage was decreased, the mechanism would move in the opposite direction. The combination of these mechanisms, along with the complex programming method, made human animatronics feasible. Still, it was a daunting task to finish one. And while work continued on the Lincoln figure, the new programming system would be put to use in the Enchanted Tiki Room. Despite originally being designed as a dinner show, the Tiki Room had become so complicated and impressive that Walt felt it deserved to be its own attraction. The new show would feature 225 animated figures, including crooning birds, singing plants, and chanting totem poles. Even with hundreds of possible actions, the Imagineers still needed to get creative with the show's programming. The show's 4 hosts were given more actions and a wider range of movement than some of the background birds, and several characters shared programming with one another to save room in the tape. Of course, all of the complicated systems and delicate machinery were completely hidden from guests, and when the attraction debuted at Disneyland in June of 1963, it was pure magic.
All the birds sing word and the flowers grow in the tiki 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 room.
The room came to life in a way that had never been seen before, and yet, this was only the beginning of what audio animatronics could achieve. In April of 19...
I'm gonna pause that for now while I try to figure out what the heck's going on. Space Policeman, if you're here still. Any idea where stickers 27 and 28 are supposed to go to? I'll hold it up to the camera here. 27 is a gray trapezoidal shape with lines on it. 28 is a tall black piece with 3 green circles. I can't figure out where they're supposed to go. It's supposed to go inside the sword. I could see that maybe. No. See if the blog has any indication. Oh, it goes on the shield. That doesn't come with the set. Okay, okay. I see. Whereas you can't see this. So the gray and the creases the stickers is looking at go on the shield. It's only in the option parts, the cross-end set, which I did not get. I got the regular vanilla release, which comes the cross-end set comes with a bigger sword and some extra weapons, like the hand slicers for Atraus. Well, I guess really I think it's just a middle piece. No, it comes with extra actual pieces for it. The hand slicer for Atraus, the neutron missile launch unit for Valerios, and the cutters for Gunper, which is what those little pop-out things are actually supposed to be for, I see. It also comes with an extra set of hands, but that's a different story. It comes with a trans saber and trans shield, which would have been nice, but no, I knew what I was getting. I've got a little bit of buyer's remorse for not getting the cross-in set, but I no point dwelling on it. And there they are with some panel lining. Or that's not panel lining, that's just using extra bits of sticker to color it in, I see. Anyway, let's do this. Time to cross in. Need the other lion's tail and the transforming ear pieces for the Bell Fighter. Alright, time to do this. Excuse me. cross in. Oh, put my extra stuff away. Okay. So, Atraus, Gunper, Valerian. Take off your hands. Already placed your antlers, your antennae. Press the arms. Fold in the legs. I will take the feet off. You don't have to take the feet off, as I discovered. You should, because otherwise you don't have waist articulation. So they can just attach on the back. And they don't look out of place at all, actually. So that goes there. That, remove the dorsal fins from here. Split it in half. Oh, right, this. Compress the feet. Alright, and then Valerius. Can store the mane and these hands. And these dorsal fins. Fold the lion legs like this. Flip it around. Alright, and cross. Slots in there. Oh, that's the wrong leg. Like that. Right. And then this one. Look at that. And that wasn't supposed to happen. There he is. Daltanious. If I could stop making the arms. Ta-da! Daltanious. So of course he can bend there. He's got 180-degree leg bend. Deep ankles. Waist rotation, head rotation. You know he's got these butterfly joints in the shoulders because those are out trousers. So the Soul of Shogoking release had some extra parts to enhance the appearance, which I get. Like bigger, bigger shoulders, which I get, but eh. The problem with the way I'm set up here is that the light is always away from me. This stand isn't even tall enough for him. Need another joint. Well, the stand technically has another joint, but I don't have that joint on this stand right now. I don't know where it is, so can't do much with it. But he comes with the sword. As all robots should. And an open hand over there. And for bonus points, as I said, I have some of Daltanious' descendants. Daltanious was the very first robot to have a lion chest, which became an iconic design and was replicated in, just to name a couple, the ones that I have on my immediate person. Live Robo and Gal King. Both decided to copy that particular design philosophy. But Daltanious did it first. Other notable examples. You can't hear me. Other notable examples with the lion chest are X-Kaiser, Gao Gaigar, some of the other Brave robots. Oh shit, I should have brought Gao Gaigar down. Whatever. A couple of the other Brave robots did it as well. There's a lot. But yeah, so that is Daltanious in the plastic. He's big. He's quite tall. I should compare with Go Lion. But yeah, it's a fun build. I'll be back this weekend probably to do the Nobel Gundam. I believe I got Nobel. Yeah, I got Nobel before Gun Tank. So Nobel Gundam this weekend. Snap Together Saturday resumes as usual. The following week will be the Gun Tank. If I do anything, which I might not. And then I'll kick off the new year with the new Gundam. And that's the plan going forward. I've also got the Netflix Gundam RX-78 that I may or may not build on camera. I don't know. I'm kind of running low on stuff. And I've got stuff in Japan, but it's not stuff on hand. So, depending if I get anything for Christmas, I may have to put the build streams on hold while I wait for a resupply. Or just do something else. Anyway, that's been Time to Build Thursday. This has been Daltanious. He is big. I'll take more pictures eventually, probably. Might detail him up, I don't know. But yep, thank you for coming out. I'll see you again when I see you. Bye-bye. Hopefully hopefully I will be feeling better. Alright.